Today is by-election day in Wakefield and Tiverton Honiton down in Devon. Now, on this channel, we've talked a couple of times before about what we call the Tory nightmare scenario. This is the idea of not only do they lose all of their 2019 Red Wall seat gains, but they also lose all their quote-unquote blue wall seats to the Lib Dems. This would be a massive wipeout for them. And these two by-elections happening today are potentially such a prelude to this nightmare really becoming reality. Now, of course, potentially things could change. Like I say, we think the next election is at least 2 years away. However, you've got, so we say certain Johnson loyalists touting October the 27th as a potential date that Johnson should call the next general election for. Will he call an early general election? We don't know. It's all up in the air, sky high. But of course, one of the key things, of course, to be looking at this general election is, of course, tactical voting. Yes, I remind you today that if you are going to the polls today, if you are in Wakefield and you want to give Johnson a kicking, vote Labour. If you're down in Devon, in Tiverton Honiton, and you're voting today, vote Lib Dem. Like I say, if you are a Labour supporter down in Tiverton and Honiton, vote Lib Dem. Equally, if you're a Lib Dem supporter and you're up in Wakefield, vote Labour. We want to give Johnson a serious kicking here. Already, the Liberal Democrats have been sending hordes and hordes of party supporters and getting people out door knocking and doing all the good stuff down in Tiverton. So we look forward to hopefully seeing a double win tonight for, well, I say a double win, but certainly a win for Labour in Wakefield and obviously Tiverton Honiton. Now, I've seen the polls for Wakefield. It's from two very reputable companies that have put Labour at least in a 20-point lead for them in Wakefield. So it almost does seem certain that that is where the Wakefield goes. I haven't seen any of the ones from down south, so we don't know how that's going to go, but it could be close. It could be very close. So before we do go jumping into this, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there is a link to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for all the people who do help and support the channel that way. And of course, there is the YouTube subscription button, where if you subscribe to it, you get all sorts of little bells and whistles. So, on with this. So, this comes today from Sky News. First time going, but they've got a really good analysis section of this. So, the analysis: Wakefield and Tiverton and Honiton by-elections. The Conservatives on the defensive in their rural heartlands and the Red Wall. This week, the government faces a big electoral test in two very different constituencies: Wakefield in Yorkshire and Tiverton and Honiton in Devon. These by-election contests may tell us a lot about the prospects of the Conservative Party at the next general election. Might its grip on the Red Wall, the Leave-voting former Labour stronghold that delivered victory in 2019, be slipping? Have the Lib Dems regained their mojo as specialists in local insurgent campaigns that mobilise discontent with the government? The by-elections may be generally tell us about whether public disgruntlement over Partygate and the cost of living is turning into an action at the ballot box. The Conservatives have already suffered two humiliating by-election losses to the Lib Dems in the past 12 months. The first in Cheshire and Marylesham, where they were on the wrong end of a swing of 25 points, and North Shropshire, following the resignation of Owen Paterson, on an even bigger swing of 34 points. Tiverton Honiton has a lot in common with the latter, being a mostly rural constituency, slightly older, less ethnically diverse, and the national average that the voted to leave in the EU in 2016 by a margin of 58 to 42. It has been a safe Tory seat for a long time, won by the party at every election since its creation back in 1997. While the Liberal Democrats typically win around 30% of the vote up until 2010, the party has not been performing strongly here in elections since the coalition. This is simply not the sort of place the Conservative Party should be losing, even during mid-term blues. And that's the key thing. The Conservative Party should not be losing here. By every single measurable metric, they should be winning this like that. But if you've seen the very interesting video recently where the Conservative candidate was, shall we say, doing a town hall and got mercilessly booed for refusing to answer a question on Boris Johnson's moral standing, things aren't looking well. Things are not looking well at all. But anyway, back to here. Wakefield, a former industrial town in the north of England, is in a different position. Held by Labour between 1931 and 2019, it is also a slightly older and less ethnically diverse than the national average, but is considerably more deprived, ranking at least 161st on the index for multiple deprivation of English constituencies. Like many of the seats won from the Conservatives from Labour back in 2019, it voted heavily 63 to 37 to leave the EU in the 2016 referendum. Labour are the clear challengers here. In terms of the pure electoral arithmetic, the by-elections represent very different electoral challenges. Wakefield is the 48th most marginal Conservative constituency. Labour requires a swing of just 3.8% of the points to win this seat. We're already seeing votes, by the way, as we mentioned earlier on, those two polls that have been done, with a lead of at least 20 points. This could go very bad for them in Wakefield. They could win a very significant loss, which I think is going to certainly put a lot of those Red Wall MPs and certainly the Northern Research Group led by Robert Jerrick in a very interesting position going on from tomorrow. So anyway, it continues. If the government were to lose all of its seats with a very smaller margin to Labour at the next general election, it would find itself short of a majority in Parliament. So Tiverton and Honiton, by contrast, of course, is the 293rd most marginal Conservative seat. So as you can see, that is the big story. Like Wakefield going lost there, great. But the big story of tomorrow will be, or at least today, will be the Tiverton and Honiton by-election. That is the one that if they lose, they are in serious trouble. Serious trouble. So if the Conservatives were to lose every seat held with a smaller majority at the general election, they would be reduced to just 72 MPs in Westminster. A defeat in Wakefield would fire a warning shot from Labour across the bow of the government, suggesting that the PM's appeal on the Red Wall in Northern England might not be as resilient as some have claimed. A defeat in Tiverton and Honiton would be catastrophic, as well as signalling the depth of disillusionment with the PM and his party. It would further establish a trend with the Lib Dems inflicting damaging losses on the Conservative Party. So what would it mean for a general election? If sustained at a general election, this could see the Conservatives caught in a pincer movement, having to defend against challenges from the Lib Dems in its traditional heartlands, at the same time as trying to resist the resurgent Labour Party in the recently won Red War. Historically, by-elections have offered a yardstick for the future of electoral prospects of government. Every government tends to lose support in by-elections, but those that repeatedly lose badly tend to do far worse at subsequent general elections. In this parliament to date, the government has on average seen its vote share fall by 7.3% in the contested by-elections. This compares somewhat favourably to most of its own predecessors, by its rather inflated by the parties winning big in Hartlepool back in May of 2021. These latest by-elections may prove to be further clues as to whether the Conservatives are losing touch with the electorate or whether it can actually regain the trust of voters before going to the ballot box next. So ultimately, that's the picture, certainly, of tonight. I might be doing a live stream tonight, so maybe we'll watch this live. We'll see. Of course, ballots will close at 10, so we might start streaming around that time. But of course, as interestingly, Wakefield, again, it's going to be a loss, certainly. Going to send rumbles through, of course, the Johnson government. But Tiverton and Honiton, if they lose that, that will send shockwaves. And of course, if they lose both, well, let's just say the 1922 committee might be changing its rules on how often it can have a vote of no confidence in the leader of the Conservative Party. So, as always, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.